We've been in a little bit of like a flamethrower series. We've been talking about what Christian teachers throughout the ages and theologians and disciplers, they'd call it spiritual formation. That's some of the vein that we've been in for the last couple of weeks as we're talking about, okay, but how do I actually follow God? I love hearing the stories about what he did. I love hearing about who he is. Those things are incredible and will always be incredible, but there's a specific vein called spiritual formation that kind of asks that question, so then how do I live? Right? So we've been kind of in that zone as we've been looking at, man, following Jesus looks a lot like laying down your entitlements and like giving up offense. It's about actually choosing to take on his portion as opposed to my own. And there's these things we've been talking about. And as kind of a guide through all of it, we've been looking with seriousness at the passage where Jesus says that in the last days, the love of many will grow cold. And we're going, oh, Father, I don't want a cold heart. Like, would you teach me how to keep my heart burning? And my hope is that that's not just up here, but that there's been moments in the last couple of weeks where you've actually felt that like, oh, there's sometimes, not to get all spiritual, but you know how like Romans says there's like groanings too deep for words? And there's like times where you're just like, we just like feel it, Hopefully you felt something like that. Maybe you haven't, or maybe this is your first time and you're like, wait, what did you guys talk about? But I'm hoping that you have something in your life you can look back on where it's like your heart is like you feel it. There's a desire in you. It's not just that's cool information. It's actually moved to your heart. Here's the word picture that I'm going to use, and we'll reference this a lot tonight, but it's like the embers of a fire, right? The coals down at a fire. I love making bonfires in my backyard. Just a fire guy. Just love it. And so my wife and I will put the kids down, and then we'll grab a warm drink of something. I'm hot chocolate, she's tea. We'll sit outside, and we'll have a bonfire. And I love sitting by the fire. But what I've started doing, my kids love bonfires, but they can't stay up late enough for it to be nighttime, and so we'll start it after they go down. But I'll put a big log on the fire right before we head in for the night. And that log just slowly burns all night. And by the time you wake up in the morning, you come out, and it looks like it's all just ash. It's like white and black, and it looks like the fire's out. But I'll take my kids, and we'll, again, warm drink, coffee this time, and I'll go out, and we'll put some like sticks and leaves on what looks like a dead fire. And I'll go, and you see it start to glow. And what was black and white is now like red and orange and burning. That's what it feels like. That's the word picture of like this, and your heart starts to like warm up and the coals start to burn a little bit. We want to name that tonight. We want to talk about that tonight. That's called zeal. We're going to talk about zeal tonight, where you feel the coals in your heart start to heat up, starts to glow a little bit. Okay, so if you've heard me teach, you know that I love the nuts and bolts and the practicals, and let's take complex things and make them simple, and that might happen tonight on accident. But my goal tonight is to come in like Coach Ben. Okay, so coaches can get away with stuff that normal people can't, because they're your coach, and you're like, I know he's on my team, so he can get away with that. Normally, I'd be enraged and want to fight him, but that's okay in this context, because he's my coach. I ran track in high school. Not well, but I ran track in high school. And I ran the 800, which is the worst. Yeah, okay. It's the worst, because it's 2 laps around the track, okay? So you can't sprint, because the human body can't sprint that long. But you can't really take it easy, because then you're going to get lapped. And so you have to find that like perfect balance of going as hard as you can, but with some restraint, and it's awful. And I wasn't good at it. And I'd round the last curve like a penguin, just like not doing well. And my coach would be running next to me faster than me because I was dying. But he's just like screaming at me. as he's running next to me. And if you've been in track, you've probably seen this. The coach is just like lit up. You gotta go. You gotta dig. You gotta go. And you're just like, ah! And there's just this moment where you're like trying your hardest and the coach is just kind of getting after you. Very inappropriate in like a Starbucks line or anywhere else in the world. But in that moment, you're like, oh, he's a good coach. So my hope is to step into Coach Ben mode a little bit. And so if you know me, you know that I love you and I love pastoring people and I'm known for being so kind and shepherding. And if I say something tonight that feels a little sharp, hear it as a coach, not as the accuser, okay? Okay, great. We're gonna talk about zeal. We're gonna talk about zeal tonight. Turn in your Bible to Romans 12. We're talking about spiritual formation, right? Read Romans 12. Like it's Paul's kind of simplified version of here's how you follow God. Each sentence is like, could be a sermon series or like you could write your doctorate on each sentence because it's so rich. But he's just kind of laying out the ground rules of here's what it looks like to be a faithful, consistent follower of Jesus. Romans 12, verse 11. What my version says is, don't be lacking in zeal, but be fervent in spirit as you serve the Lord. Your version might not say zeal, but I looked up the Greek and it's the word zelios. It's zeal. He's talking about zeal. Don't be lacking in zeal, but be fervent in spirit. There's this intensity. There's this thing that Paul's saying, don't let that coal go down. Don't be lacking in zeal. Stoke it. Stay hot, right? It's a mark of those that follow Jesus. And Coach Ben here, okay? We as a community find ourselves in a spot where, if I'm honest, I look at it and I go, I think that we are, for most of us in our lives, we're leaning into wisdom at the expense of zeal. And those two things are both godly and both good, so hear me out, okay? It's like we're standing on a seesaw right in the middle, and there's zeal and there's wisdom, and you're trying to find the right balance. You're just like, this is what I've observed. As people follow Jesus, there's a tension there, right? Because you'll read the Bible, and one day you're reading, and it's like, sell everything you have and give to the poor. And you're like, okay. Like, the zeal of the Lord starts coming, you're like, babe, I don't even know why we have a car. Like what are we doing? You know, there's like zeal mode. And then the next day you're reading in Proverbs, and you're like, well, wait a second. Now it's talking about stewardship, and it's talking about like the man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an unbeliever. And you're like, okay. Babe, take it off Craigslist, car's staying. And we're just trying to find the balance, right? It feels like zeal and wisdom compete sometimes, right? Like, can we just admit, like, I'm just gonna drop out of, like, I was planning on going to college, but I love God so much, and the way that I know how to do that is I'm gonna drop out of college, I'm gonna let go of the scholarship, and I'm gonna run and do a, like, missions school, or I'm gonna do something, like, wild and crazy. And it's like, awesome, go for it, that's good. You can find a ton of verses in a bunch of situations where that's the right thing. And then there's this other thing that goes like, man, God's called me to be a doctor, and you have to go to a lot of school to be a doctor. And my mom and dad are not on board with this decision, and there's all these verses about honoring your mother and father, and it's like, well, and so we're trying to find the balance between zeal and wisdom. And I feel like the Lord has kind of helped me understand this by saying it's two sides of the same sword. They're like the machete as you're going through the like tall grass, I don't know, brush, that. I don't know. You're like trying to follow God, and you're just like, and both sides need to be sharp. Zeal and wisdom. If you have all wisdom but no zeal, you're dead inside. And if you have what did I say? Wisdom? If you don't have one or the other, it's not, you're not alive on the inside. Because if you're just all zeal, no wisdom, then it's like, man, your blade is just like wounding people constantly. And if you're all wisdom and no zeal, then you're not swinging hard enough. You're not going to get through. Like, you need both. We need both. But I think that for most of us, we're in a point where we need to sharpen the zeal side. We need to ask dangerous questions and do dangerous things for the Lord, because we've so hunkered in to good wisdom, but wisdom has become a safeguard against risk and against extravagance. And so we want to talk about zeal tonight. But But before we do, just want to have us just pause, because the overarching theme of tonight is that I can't make you zealous. There's nothing I can say that's going to be good enough or persuasive enough that you leave with actual zeal on your heart. That's God's job. God needs to be the one that breathes on your heart. And so I might pause intermittently and have us just interact with him. I just want us to ask ourselves, which side of my sword is sharper right now? Zeal or wisdom? What do I find myself using more? What side's sharper? Go ahead and just ask yourself that. It's not even asking the Lord. Just do an audit of your life. Awesome. So if you realized that your zeal side needs a little sharpening, lean in. That's what tonight's for, okay? Okay. I have been all over the map on the zeal wisdom spectrum, but I, just kind of naturally, personality-wise, have leaned a little more naturally on the like expressive zeal side. Like growing up, I was in a faith tradition that was not super expressive, but I loved God. Like I really loved God. And so I was the bold one that would raise his hands during worship, right? Or like I was the first one to pray out loud in the small group setting at like, what's the meet me at the flagpole thing? See you at the pole, that's it. Praying outside your public school like a radical. And I was like the first one to like, so it's like, wow, in that context, it's like, whoa, Ben is fired up. And like genuinely loved God. And then through a crazy set of circumstances, found myself in a YWAM DTS, a discipleship training school in Kona, Hawaii, with this group called Fire and Fragrance. And didn't realize that I'd been dropped into like the bubbling cauldron of zeal. But when I got dropped in there, it was like I got saved all over again. Because I'm like, wait a second, God talks today to me? Hold on, you're telling me that I can hear, you're telling people get healed? Are you kidding? Like, I didn't know any of it. And I got lit up for God, and the zeal monster was let off the chain. I was in a context that like celebrated, like, be passionate for God, go wild for Jesus. And I'm like, are you sure? And I went ballistic. I was a one-man mosh pit during worship. It's like everyone's singing How Great Is Our God by Chris Tomlin, and I'm just like, just raging. At the time, I had dreadlocks. I put them in quotes because I looked like a palm tree more than it like looking cool. I found a picture on Facebook of the Zeal monster. Do we have that one? There he is. Ben. Strong palm tree vibes. On the right, I'm sure that I was like singing Let It Rain in a public park as loud as I could, like just going for it. Yeah, that guy. Okay, we can get rid of that if you want. Yeah, that guy was just like unleashed. And during like prayer times, I was like, oh, it's time to pray. Like I didn't pray quiet prayers. And it's like, all right, we need someone to bless the food. Jesus! Oh, Father, we thank you for this food. Just like fired up constantly. I was, like I said, I had found out that God spoke. And I was like, this is the craziest thing in the world. So if anything has legs, I'm about to prophesy over it. Like anything with legs. You get a word, and you get a word, and you get a word. And then it's like, oh, you don't have legs? I found out he heals. Come on, bring it over. And I was like, I was unleashed. And an absolute nightmare to disciple, probably. But just like zeal. Right? Had a buddy with a hurt knee in one ministry night. I just get like, and I like move over and I'm like, you're getting healed tonight. And he's like, okay. And I was convinced it was the Lord. And I had this thought come into my head, the story where Jesus spits in the dirt and that's how he heals him. Yeah, there wasn't any dirt around. We were inside. So I had enough self-awareness and self-protection to ask him, I'm like, hey, I feel like I'm supposed to spit on your knee. And he was like, okay. And so just right there, the palm tree just spits on him. And and like, be healed in the name of Jesus. Just fiery prayer. Didn't get healed, but it was great. And I would like, but guys, here's the thing. Like, we're all laughing and I'm laughing because it's funny. But it's like, I was lit up on Jesus. I was like, he's real. Like, you couldn't stop me because he was real, and I knew it. And I was in Hawaii at the time, right? And so on the weekend, it's like, there's a beach 200 yards that way in Hawaii. And my friends would go, and after spending 4 hours a day in the house of prayer, because that was part of our like discipleship school, 4 hours a day that week, I'd be like, I just want to be in the prayer room. You guys go to the beach. I'll be here. Just burning, right? Friday nights, they're all going to get ice cream. I'm like, who's down for worship time? And I just 4 chords and not much else. But like, it was genuine. It was so immature. And it was so, I'm sure there was pride in it that was just like loved being noticed. I'm sure there was something that liked being the culture setter. I'm sure there was things that was trying to gain acceptance, for sure, because I was 18. And it's like, I'm immature. But there was something genuine in that. There was something in it where I look back at that, and in spite of that we saw, I'm like, man, what if, like, that was good. There's something good about it, something sharp about it. And I remember times of just like opening up the Bible. I remember one night, I don't know, I didn't share this in the first service, but I remember one night I was reading through Romans at like, 10:30 at night. I'm in the prayer room with a bunch of other hippies with, all their hemp necklaces and whatever like I had. And I'm reading, and I got to Romans 5 where it talks about like God's grace, and I just like bawled my eyes out. Like, didn't care that it was quiet and there's no one else in the room, was completely unconcerned that I was disrupting everybody, just like couldn't contain it, bawling, because I'm like, has anyone ever read this before? Like, I was just like, bonfire, right? And so I share all of that to say that that's a part of my, it's a part of my history and a part of what's in there. And also, I then got married and had a job and had kids and got a mortgage, and like life happened. And what I've realized is that zeal side that was so sharp, that was far too sharp and was wounding a lot of people probably, had started to get dull. And if you would have known me 10 years ago, you'd be like, anybody but Ben would probably flame out. But like, Ben's gonna be this way forever because I was just so zealous. And then if I stop and look at the last 10, 12 years, I'm like, that wisdom side sure got sharp. And it was really good. And there's a lot of maturity that came. And there's a ton of like discipleship and a lot of good. But the zeal side's a little bit dull. And so I've been stirred up to just kind of say, man, I don't want to be 50, 60, 70 and accidentally find that I've got a cold heart because I didn't intentionally lean into cultivating zeal in my life. And so when you look at the word zeal in both Hebrew and Greek, it's tied to the word picture of something on fire. It's tied to burning. And so if you're trying to say like, is zeal just like mosh pit dancing, or like what does zeal look like? It's like zeal is what we talked about when we started. It's that inner flame that just starts to rumble a little bit. That's like, I'm feeling it, right? Zeal is an emotion, but it's an emotion that's intrinsically tied to a goal. Okay, so zeal says that's what I want. Target identified, and then we move. That's what zeal is. It's fervency, intensity, passion. It's these different words that you can use, but it's the grit, it's the lean in, it's the push through the obstacles thing. That's what zeal is. And it's different than hunger. Okay, so let's talk about this really, really quick. Hunger is what we talked about earlier. Like, I've identified that there's a lack. I've identified that there's more, that I'm not where I could be. That hunger identifies that, okay? And that's the catalyst, because if you think that you're full, you're never gonna go after anything. So come to the hunger conference, get lit up with hunger, because there's always more. But zeal isn't just I'm hungry. Zeal is the wolf in the woods who's hungry, who starts to like stalk around a little bit and is like, I'm gonna get fed tonight. And like, wolves will live, my son is really into animals, so if you have any questions on wolves, hit me up, or hit him up. One wolf has a territory of like 16 miles, and it just prowls around, and it's just like a hunting machine. And it's not just hunger, it's like whatever it takes. However long I have to wait here, however long I have to stalk, however long I have to, okay, now pause, and now sprint. But all I know is I'm about to eat. It's the pursuit, okay? So that's zeal. And then for more definition, we can look to God. Because how many of you know that God has zeal in him? There's an aspect of God that is burning. That's like, it's sometimes translated like jealous, or it's like there's this part of God that's burning. And just observationally, it seems like Isaiah had a specific window into God as like the zealous one, because it pops up in his book a lot. Let me read some of these, okay? Isaiah 9, verse 7. You know the first part of the verse. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. Then the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. He's not passively going, justice, judgment, increase, kingdom. There's like a burning. It's like the zeal of God is what's going to make this happen. Because he's zealous, here's what's going to happen, right? Isaiah 42:13. The Lord goes out like a mighty man, like a man of war. He stirs up his zeal. Yes. Let this break your brain a little bit. What does it look like for God Almighty to stir up his zeal? Holy smokes. Makes me think of like Psalm 18, right? Where it's like the Lord thundered from on high. Lightning was his arrows. It's like there's an intensity. God, it's the classic Aslan line, right? I feel like I quote Chronicles of Narnia so much when I teach. But it's like, is he safe? No, but he's good. But he's not safe, right? There's this like rumbling, thundering, lightning, fire God. Isaiah 59, the Lord wrapped himself in zeal as with a cloak. It's intentional. He's like putting on zeal. And then when I say God has zeal, what most of us probably thought of was the story in John 2, where Jesus walks into the temple and starts flipping tables because it's desecrating his Father's house. And his disciples look at him and say, this is what David wrote about in Psalm 69. Zeal for your house has consumed me. How many of you know that there's a lot of really good wisdom that would say, do not flip tables in the temple? But we need to be provoked by the fact that God in the flesh at certain times found it appropriate to just go a little buck wild. Okay? So we need to let that kind of like stoke us up a little bit, because for most of us, we don't understand zeal. Zeal is, hear me on this, most of us would have a negative connotation when we think of zeal. We would think it's either immaturity or like a aggressive legalism. Like, if I say the word zealot, negative connotation for most of us. Maybe it's just me because I'm Scandinavian, but like most of us would have like a negative view towards like zealous. We think of it as immaturity, where it's like, whoa, you just need to grow out of that thing. So, dear sweet sister just got saved, and look at her dance freely up in the front. Oh, sweetie, that's so precious. And in the back of your head going, and then life's gonna hit you, and then you're gonna grow up, and you'll eventually be just like me. Guy just gets encountered by the love of God. He met Jesus, and he's like, my life is different. He's telling all of his friends about Jesus, and you're like, keep it up. And there's this subtle condescension that's like, yeah, zeal's kind of how it starts, but just don't get too excited. We don't understand zeal. We have so leaned on the side of wisdom and maturity that we've made zeal less than. Or we think of it like the Pharisees, where it's like this zealous, angry, like do the thing, and it's about the box, and you have to fit in the box, and if you're not in the box, I'm gonna tell you you're not in the box. I remember rebuking all of my friends in Zeal Monster mode when they were watching some movie, and I think that there was maybe like a kissing scene or something. It was like a PG movie, and I was like, are you kidding me? And walked out. Just like, wow, okay, that's an example of like, you've gone to, like, that doesn't sound like love, that sounds more angry, that sounds more rigid. So we think of zeal, and we think of it either being immature or like wounding people. And so we go, I'm just gonna mature past it, for most of us. And so what I wanna do is just talk about those two things specifically, where we'd call zeal immature, or when we'd call it like this aggressive legalism. I wanna kind of take that apart and say, here's yes, that can be the case, or it can not be the case. So hear me out on this, okay? I'd say for most of us, we think of zeal as it being like somehow immature. And so I'll start there. There's a story in 2 Kings chapter 10 about a guy named Jehu. Just sounds like a zeal monster. Jehu. Jehu was a commander in King Ahab's army. Okay, so he was working for the king as a member of the military. He was a warrior. What he did was he fought people. He killed people. He was a warrior. And at this time in Israel's history, there was a lot of bad stuff going on. Ahab and Jezebel were in charge, and they're like generational bad guys. They're not just like, they don't do good stuff. It's like they're the boss at the end of the video game, bad guys. Ahab and Jezebel. And God's like, had enough. We're doing this right now. I love them. They're being led astray into Baal worship. This is garbage. Let's do something. He taps a few people and gives them assignments. Jehu's one of the people God taps. And he says, Jehu, I want you to go and rid the nation of Baal. Get rid of every trace of Ahab and Jezebel. It's a desecration. Zeal monster Jehu, who is a warrior by trade, goes, yes and amen, and just goes crazy. And if you read the story, like Jehu just goes completely, like freight train, just slaughters, just like goes nuts. And he's like, there's one scene where he pretends to be a Baal worshiper and says, I want all the prophets of Baal to come, and like tricks them in to like meets them and then just kills them all. Just like going like nuts, okay? There's this story where he's riding in his chariot on his warpath, and there's a random citizen off to the side. And he's like, maybe this guy's gotta go. And so he veers over, challenges this guy. This guy says, no, I'm not, like I'm on your side. And the quote from Jehu in the Bible is, come and see my zeal for the Lord. Brings him up, puts him in the chariot, and continues on his warpath. There's this he's zealous and he knows it and he wants you to see it. But he's doing what God said. He's actually, that was his assignment. And so when it's all said and done, the nation is actually freed up from Ahab and Jezebel, and God validates Jehu and says, you did what I asked you to do. But then Jehu becomes king. And here's the summary of Jehu's kingship in the same chapter, 2 Kings 10, verse 31. But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord. There were other false gods. There were golden calves that were still up in Bethel and some other spot that I can't remember. There was still like some pagan stuff going on. There was still unrighteousness, and Jehu didn't touch it because he's like, I did my job. I love the warrior stuff. Man, it was the word of the Lord just matched up perfectly. Isn't he kind to just use me in my giftings, and I'm a warrior, and use me as a warrior, and I'm all in on that. But then walking in the law of the Lord, ooh, that's a lot of rules. Don't really, And suddenly that zeal that was so fiery hot, you don't see it anymore. Reminds me of the story, the parable of the sower sowing seeds. And there's one seed that falls on stony soil. And it receives the word with joy and shoots up, but then there's no real root to it. So it withers and dies. So can zeal be immature? Absolutely. Can it be something that in some way kind of gratifies ourselves and we're doing the right thing or even being obedient, but there's not a real depth of maturity to it? Absolutely. God gives you a word to be wild in worship, and you're naturally expressive, and you're naturally an extrovert, and you naturally are, you're an artist, and so you're like, I love being wild in worship, and there's a big yes and amen in your heart, and that's beautiful. You are obedient. God talks to the introvert and says, come away with me to the secret place, and they're like, yes, Lord. And it lines up so well. But zeal isn't limited by, is this what I want to do? Am I excited about it? Zeal is burning and consuming. And it says, whatever's in front of me, it's going to get consumed because I'm burning. So here's where we come to the question that everyone has to ask. So what if I don't feel it though? Right? What if I don't feel it? There's this, Coach Ben, there's an addiction to authenticity that we have that is good but misguided, where we so badly just want to be authentic that it feels like an affront to ourselves to do something that we don't feel like doing. So that's actually selfishness, just to call it what it is. That's actually self-centeredness. So, Coach Ben, okay? So it's like, man, but I just gotta find a way to do this authentically, and this doesn't really feel like me. Have you met you without Jesus? You don't want to be you, right? I don't want to be me. I don't want to say I just want to be me. I sign up to follow him. I sign up to look like him. And so there's a discipleship that happens where I go, I know I don't feel it, but that's never been the barometer for what I do with my life. I laid down my right for that. So why is that even a consideration right now? So zeal just consumes. And so what I'm not saying is fake it till you make it, okay? A lot of people say that phrase, and I think that they mean something different. Because all of us kind of know that if I was like, hey, you don't feel like worshiping? Just go in the front and like be really bold and dance and like worship because that's faith. You'd be like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Something's off there, Ben, right? So here's what zeal looks like. Zeal says to the Father, I got nothing. I feel like I've got nothing. It was a really hard week. You know, you were there. It was a really hard week. I'm tired. My kids were up at 2 a.m. and then my dog threw up all over the floor and I'm distracted and I've got that bill that I'm thinking of and, oh, the car is broken. Awesome. And I'm trying to worship God. I got 2 pennies. Here you go. Zeal says, I'm still going. And my goodness, it costs me something. And my goodness, is it unimpressive? And my goodness, is anyone around me gonna validate that? No, not at all. But zeal says, still you though. I'm still gonna give what I got. And it's 2 pennies today. Slide them into the table. That's what godly zeal looks like. And so we see this in the life of David. David has all the zeal of Jehu, but with the humility. David's the man, so you find him as a shepherd boy, burning, just singing songs by himself and fighting off wild animals with all this confidence. Then he meets Goliath and he's like, who is this uncircumcised Let me at him. Like, just burning. And then he gets thrown out into the wilderness and Saul's hunting him, burning. And then he becomes the king, burning. And then he makes a mistake. He totally fails, burning. He doesn't stop burning. He's the same guy that wrote, I'd rather be a doorkeeper at the gates of my God than anywhere else. Oh, my soul is like longing and panting like a deer who hasn't had anything to drink. I'm dying for this. I want him. There's only one thing that I want, God. I just want to be in your courts. I just want to ask you questions and meditate on you. That's all I want. And he's burning. And at the very end of his life, as he's giving his charge to Solomon, who's about to be king, he said, you read it, it's nuts. 2 Kings 2, I think. He says, all right, come here. Be a man. Follow God. He like gets in Solomon's grill and is like, here's what you're gonna do, young man. As he's on his deathbed, burning. David never stopped burning. He made mistakes, he did it wrong. There were times where it was weak. There was times where his selfishness got in the way, but he just was like, I found it. Target acquired, it's him. And at all costs, it's him. There's a way for zeal to be present and matured over time. It's not just immature, it's not just flighty, it's not just selfishness, it's not just self-seeking. There can be an internal burning that's actually committed for the long haul. My father-in-law, Candy's dad, burning, 65, back in pain, feet in pain, painting in his house, just singing in tongues, burning. Wakes up at 5 a.m., slams on his guitar, just worshiping. The whole house at 5 a.m. is just echoing, burning. First time that I met him, literally, I'd go to see Candy's family when we're dating to meet her family because we were in Hawaii and they're in California. So I go there late, crash, wake up in the morning, breakfast, burning. here's the word of the Lord to you, young man. Like, burnt. It's possible. I'm just saying it's possible. You don't need to look back and say, man, my most zealous days were when I was younger and didn't know quite as much. You can burn, okay? So hopefully we've laid to rest this notion that says that zeal is immaturity. It can be, but it's not inherently immature, okay? Flip side. Okay, so you're just saying that I just got to do all the stuff. You're saying that that I can like just constantly stir up all these works and I'm going to be, oh, wow, shoot. Well, now I'm thinking about Pharisees and I'm thinking about legalism and I'm thinking about this kind of gross, angry, aggressive form of religion that I want nothing to do with. So are you saying that, Ben? Of course not, okay? Let's do this, the same little journey, all right? So Paul talks in Romans 10 about the Jewish people. And he loves them. They've abused him more than any other people group. And he's still like, Romans 10:1, he's like, my earnest desire for Israel is that they'd be saved. There's affection and a tenderness in his heart still. And then he says this, for I bear witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. He's validating their zeal. He's like, this is good. I can see that in him. But they're going after the wrong target. It's not an informed zeal that's actually locked onto the right target. And then he goes on to talk about how Israel was still trying to do all of this stuff to earn their righteousness. And he's saying, you're tying your works and your, like how hard you work and the amount of zeal that you have and the amount of laws that you follow, you're equating that with him. You're off target. That's not actually gonna buy you anything. Zeal is intrinsically not like good or bad. It just needs to be aimed and you're off target, right? And so there's all this work that goes into it. I was helping my dad build a gazebo yesterday, and part of what you do is you gotta hold this thing onto this thing really tight, this piece of wood and that piece of wood really tight, while someone else comes and screws it in and like secures it. And so I'm up on this ladder just quaking, holding this post and this beam and like pinching it together so that my dad can get a couple screws through it. And my head's up like this, and I'm like heavy breathing, sweating, like it's really hard work. So I'm like pulling this thing together. And then after a little while, my dad's like, hey, you can let go now. Because the screws were already in it. And I was like, and I was still pushing just as hard, but it wasn't doing anything. The screws had already gone in. So all of my work was just like, it was literally just tiring me out. There wasn't like a value in it. It wasn't contributing to the success of the project. It was just Ben up there having zeal without knowledge. Just holding it together. And like zeal that errs on the side of like this religious thing, it's a form of self-righteousness. It's a form of people saying, well, I think this is how I can earn the praise of God, the praise of man, or an internal peace of mind that says that I'm doing good enough, right? And so if I commit to read the Bible for an hour a day, and then I share the gospel with at least 2 people a day, and then I make sure that my prayers have a little bit of extra Jesus in them, then I'm gonna be okay. And that makes me feel good, that makes other people validate me. People think that I'm burning, and now I somehow think that I'm burning because I'm validating myself, and I'm in this cycle that eventually ends up wounding people and leading to more and more legalism, and it's leading me further away from God. It's zeal that's not aimed properly. Quick pastoral note here. A lot of us have been raised so much in the grace message that then we hear that and we go, yeah, you're right. I should stop reading the Bible because it's been tiring and it's probably just religion and like, I just need to like let go and have grace in myself. It's like, again, Coach Ben, we as a house don't typically struggle with we're doing way too much works, and it's like we need to lean in a little bit. And so don't hear what I'm not saying. Don't hear that any time that you commit to something and there's a commitment that's done completely out of a sense of like, man, I think this is the right thing. Don't just start cutting off all of that and call it religion. We're too prone to that. We actually need to have consistency. It just needs to be aimed at the right thing. Our zeal needs to be aimed properly. And there are all these examples, specifically in the New Testament that we can look at, of people who had this fervency and this ridiculous extravagance, and they were doing things that no one else would do, but they were aimed at him, right? Mary cracking open all of her inheritance. A little bit would have been enough. It would have communicated the message. It would have, It would have been a powerful story if she took the bottle that was set aside for her inheritance and poured some out. We'd all be impressed. But it's not about that for Mary. She's going, are you kidding? It's him? Breaks it. Uses her own hair to wipe, just like this unbelievable, extravagant affection, right? The book of Acts, where the apostles see the risen Jesus, and then he ascends, and then fire comes down. They're like, I've seen enough. I'm sold. And they are unwavering. And they're burning, and they're preaching in the streets, and they're saying, no, it's him. And then here come the Pharisees going, I'm just gonna need you to tone it down, young man. You're causing a bit of a disturbance. And they're like, sorry, can't. Burning. Then we're gonna throw you in jail. Suits me. Burning. And they don't stop. Stephen, the first martyr, who's about to get killed, he knows he's about to die, stands up with confidence and preaches the gospel. Burning. Paul. If anyone had a good excuse to just tone it down a little bit, whoa, look at all that you've done for God. You got 39 lashes, just like Jesus. Wow, you must know what it feels like to be like him. Wow, good job, brother. He's like, no, he told me to preach the gospel. God told me that I was gonna be his witness to the Gentiles. God showed up to me and told me that I would know what it meant to suffer. And so of course, this is all part of the plan. I can't stop because I'm burning, I'm consuming. I've got a zeal for what I see. I've got a vision for what's ahead. Paul says, I'm letting go of all of that. He's like, oh great, so I was raised by Gamaliel and I did the thing and I'm gonna try. Screw it. Like he's like burning. You hear it in his letters where there's times where he just starts to get almost overcome by it. You know that verse where he's like, I wish they'd cut themselves off. There's times where he just gets like fired up and he's just burning. And Paul is like an old man who's seen so much pain, who has every reason to rest on his laurels a little bit. I'm gonna finish the race. I see what's ahead. And he's burning. And here's the key distinctive of what godly Christian zeal looks like. Here's how you stay safe in the journey, on the seesaw. Is it immature? Is it self-righteousness? Burning love for Jesus. Do not make it about the fast. Don't make it about the giving. Don't make it about the Bible reading. All of that is unto him. There needs to be a burning love. I've never once looked at a husband who has outrageous affection to his wife and said, whoa, buddy, you gotta calm that down a little bit. I've never once seen a bride getting ready on her wedding day and go like, okay, it's good enough, like it's fine. I've never seen a young man who wants to get engaged who's going to buy a ring and gone like, I don't know, it's kind of expensive to buy a ring. No, extravagance makes sense in the context of love. Extravagance makes sense in the context. Zeal makes sense in the context of love. So that's our target. We're just going, no, I love him. I love him. Lovers will always outwork workers. Someone who's in love will always, 100 times out of 100, work harder than someone who's doing it for a paycheck. There's a limit when you're working for a paycheck and you go, man, it's just not worth it. Like I did the cost analysis. You're paying me how much? And I'm gonna do that. It's not worth it. But when you're in love, burning. You're gonna find me outside of my girlfriend's house singing love songs like an idiot. Burning. You're gonna find me being outrageously extravagant with my kids. The amount of times that I do stuff where I'm like, I would never have imagined that I would have done this. But it's in love for my kids. It's like I'm finding myself doing all these things, but it's because I love them. It's the story that's hardwired into us. That's why we all resonate with every single fairy tale of the prince who goes, at any cost, I'll climb any tower, I'll fight any dragon. This has been happening for centuries and centuries. There's this theme story of a pursuing love that doesn't take no for an answer. It makes sense in the context of love. We need to reorient how we view our pursuit of God. It needs to be about showing him love and affection. John shared this in his story, right? The guy who's interviewing him just going, wait, it's about love. A lot of us have been following Jesus for a long time, and we need to hear that again. We need to hear that your zeal needs to be focused in love. During the First Great Awakening, there's this quote that came out of the First Great Awakening, and it said, Light a man on fire and the world will come to watch him burn. There was these revival meetings, and they're like, what do we do? How do we spread this? They're like, just burn. They'll come, just burn. Because they saw a picture of what it looked like to actually pursue him. And they got a picture of what he looked like, and they're like, I'm not taking no for an answer. Burn. Paul, he's praying for the church, 2 Corinthians 11. The word in your Bible might say jealous. It's that word again, Zealios, zeal. I am jealous. I am burning for you, church, with a godly zeal, a godly burning. I've betrothed you to one husband, and I want to present you as a pure virgin to Christ. He's saying, I'm committed to this. I'm burning. I want him to have you. I want you to have him. And so I want you to hear the intensity in my voice as this much of like the Pauline zeal that's going like, I want you to know him. I want you to have your sight set on him. I don't want you to look at your bank account and go, so this is my ultimate authority on what I do with my finances. I don't want you to look at your portfolio for work and say, so this is what I'm working with, and this is my job now, and this is what I'm good at. I don't want you to look around at the body and say, okay, well, my skill set is more maybe this, and so I'm not going to do that because that's maybe more their skill set over there. Burn. Burn. Have there be something that's consuming in you that looks at him and goes, whatever it takes. Band, you can come up. I want to read this. I wrote this for us because like I said at the beginning, I can't create zeal. I can't preach good enough. I can't coach good enough to get you to a place where your heart starts burning. That's God's job. But as a brother, as a shepherd, however you consider me, what I can do is I can be wind in your sails and I can give you permission. Sometimes we just need permission. We just need to be told, you can do this, it's okay. So I want to read this. To my younger brothers and sisters, the ones who are younger than me, who are in your high school, college, early adult phase, where you're still trying to figure things out. To my younger brothers and sisters, zeal doesn't have to be immature or self-righteous. You have permission to burn with love. You have permission to be the most passionate, radical one in your friend group. You have permission to spend long hours stirring up love for God in the secret place. You have permission to fast from food or media, and not just for a day and not just for a week. You have permission to take risks and fail. You have permission to give a year or a decade or your lifetime to the Lord in singleness. You have permission to ignore your culture's obsession with self-image and money. You can give large sums of money away. You can intentionally live in simplicity. You have permission to love, and you have permission to lead us. And to my older brothers and sisters, to the ones that have seen more years than I have, who've lived more life than I have, who have more experience than me, who have been further down the road. To my older brothers and sisters, zeal doesn't have to be immature or self-righteous. You can burn with love. You have permission to be the most radical, passionate one in your friend group. You have permission to spend long hours stirring up love for God in the secret place. You have permission to fast from food or media, and not just for a day or a week. You have permission to take risks and fail. You have permission to give the rest of your life to the Lord in singleness. You have permission to ignore your culture's obsession with self-image and money. You can give away large sums of money right now or intentionally live a simple life. You have permission to love, and you have permission to lead us. We don't outgrow zeal for God. We don't outgrow burning for God. You have permission to burn. I'm not going to tell you what that looks like. I came up with a little list. But I'm telling you this, there's a place of extravagant, zealous, burning love that we have not touched yet. And it's intimidating, and we start noticing all of the insecurity in our hearts and all of the things we might have to let go of. forget it. Just forget it. Just let zeal burn it all up. I love being pastoral and giving the qualifying statements. I'm not going to give any of them to anything that I just said. I'm not going to try and soften anything because I want you to know that I'm actually serious, that we're actually serious. There's a place of intensity and a place of burning that you have permission to go where it feels a little dangerous. You have permission to step into something that feels a little wild. Do not be lacking in zeal, but be fervent in spirit as you serve the Lord. I want us to just, let's all stand and spread out. We're just gonna take a moment to process with the Lord, to ask him some questions, to worship him. Go ahead and spread out if you want, get a little elbow room. I want us to just ask ourselves first, just look inside and look at that like inner flame, that coal, that if you're saved, I promise you, it's in there. You gave your heart to Jesus, I promise you, there's a coal that's in there, and it might look white and black, and it might feel cold to the touch. Or maybe it's a bonfire, I don't know, but I want you to imagine that. What does it look like right now in your heart? The burning coal of zealous love. Now just ask Father God, would you blow on that coal? Jesus, I want to burn. Jesus, I want to burn. I can't make you say anything. I cannot stir up zeal for you. Anything that's happening in your heart right now is purely because the Spirit of God is blowing on it, not because of anything that I'm saying. But if there's something in you that you just want to communicate to him, just like, I want to burn. Man, there's that thing, there's that thing that's been in the way. I can picture it in my mind right now. There's that thing that's been in the way. I want that thing to be burned up with zealous love in my heart. There's been that person's opinion, and I am completely slave to that person's opinion. No more. Let the fire increase and let it burn up. I love wisdom, God, but don't ever let it keep me from burning for you.